This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. I'm also sponsored by Face to Face Games, Canada's premier Magic the Gathering store. Using the promo code MTGMudsta will get you 5% off site-wide, with eligible orders getting free shipping Canada-wide. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game was filmed in my studio space, but unfortunately we didn't film opening hands. Eric is playing Giada, which is primarily built with angels and gaining life and making big angels. Bryce is playing Ulamog, which is colorless Eldrazi. Kuzno is playing Lonis, who's built around making, using, and abusing clue tokens. And last but not least, I've got Vilis, which cares about gaining and losing life. I win the die roll and start us off. I play a Swamp and cast Phyrexian Reclamation. Kuzno plays a Bark Channel Pathway and then casts a Gilder Baron. Bryce has a Radiant Fountain, gaining 2 as it comes in. Eric just plays a tap Path of Ancestry. I play a Swamp and pass after that. Kuzno plays an Island and casts his Commander. He then hits Bryce with a Baron and passes after that. Bryce draws and plays a Mage Ring Network. Eric has a Plains for turn and taps 2 for a Bishop of Wings. I just play a Ghost Quarter and pass. Kuzno plays another Island and casts an Erdwalled Illuminator. He investigates with Lonis and gets a second one thanks to the Illuminator. He passes after that. During his end step, Bryce pays to put a counter on his Mage Ring Network. Bryce plays a Reliquary Tower, passing. Eric has a Secluded Courtyard and names Angels. He then casts a Resplendent Angel, gaining some life from the Bishop, but sadly not enough to trigger the Angel's End of Turn ability. He passes after that. I just play a tap Bajuka Bog and exile Bryce's graveyard to send a message. Kuzno draws and casts a Tireless Provisioner. He gets to investigate twice as it enters thanks to his earlier mentioned synergy, and then goes to combat. He pokes Bryce for 1 with the Illuminator before passing. During the end step, Bryce adds another counter to the network. Bryce plays a Rogue's Passage for turn, and then removes the counters to help cast a Forsaken Monument. He passes after that. Eric plays a Seraph Sanctuary and gains a life as it enters. He then plays Righteous Valkyrie, gaining to scry from the path. He keeps it on top, and then gains a bunch of life as it enters. This is enough to meet the Resplendent Archangel's trigger, making him an angel and gaining him more life from the Bishop seeing the angel enter. I draw and pay 3 for Beseech the Queen. I tutor for a card and reveal it, which is Liliana of the Dark Realms. I pass after that, and during my end step, Kuzno uses Lonis and sacrifices some clues and targets Bryce. He exiles Bryce's top 4 cards and keeps the Mannequin among them. With the Mannequin entering, he gets 2 more clue tokens. Kuzno plays a Forest and makes a treasure from the Tireless Provisioner, and he then casts an Inspiring Statuary. He's now able to tap his clues to help pay for Root Out and targets the Forsaken Monument. It gets destroyed, and he gets to investigate again. He then taps more clues for mana to help cast Manipulate Fate, which, while still in the stack, has Eric using Path to Exile to take out the Tireless Provisioner. Kuzno shortcuts finding a land and exiling the 3 cards at the same time. He reveals Eternal Scourge, Mist Hollow Griffin, and Evolving Wilds. He then draws after that. More clues are then tapped for the Eternal Scourge, and he investigates again as it comes in. Going to combat, he hits me. Bryce draws and plays a Sequestered Stash as his land drop. He then casts an Urgolem Eye, passing to Eric. Eric plays a Herald's Horn and names Angels. He then casts Giada and gets a Scry trigger, leaving it on top, and then gains a bunch of life as she comes in. He then swings the Angel Army at Kuzno, dealing 15, and he takes the hit. Eric then moves to his end step, making another angel token and gains 10 life as it enters, and gets to add some counters to it thanks to Giada. I draw and play a swamp. I then cast the Liliana that I'd tutored for earlier, and once she's out, uptick her to find a swamp to put to hand. I pass after that. Kuzno draws and cracks a clue to draw again. He then casts the Solemn Simulacrum, getting more clue tokens, and going to find a tap basic from his library. He passes, while Bryce adds another storage counter to the network at the end of turn. Bryce plays a Sanctum of Ugin as his land drop, and then pays 5 for a Metalwork Colossus. He gets to sacrifice the Sanctum after casting the Colossus, and goes to tutor for and reveal a Voidwind Ore to put to hand. He then casts a Manifold Key and passes to Eric. Eric's upkeep has the Horn trigger, but he whiffs. And he then plays a Plains and casts Cleansing Nova. He picks to blow up all artifacts and enchantments. Kuzno responds with Lonis' ability and looks at Eric's top 6, keeping Lyra Dawnbringer. Eric then goes to combat and swings most of his angels at Kuzno, the Resplendent at Bryce, and Giada just pokes Liliana. Kuzno blocks the Righteous Valkyrie with Lyra to stem some life loss, thanks to her life gain. With nothing else, Eric passes after that. I just play a swamp, uptick Liliana to find another one, and pass after that. Kuzno plays a Foily Reliquary Tower, and then casts a Whirler Rogue. He makes 2 Thopters as it enters, and gets to make some clue tokens, and passes after that. Bryce untaps and draws. He plays a Gargoyle Castle for his land for turn, showing just how many colorless land sources there really are, before passing to Eric. Eric untaps, and continues to be a problem with his massive angel army. He plays Angel of Jubilation, scrying 1, and bottoming it. He also adds some +1/+1 counters to her, thanks to Giada, and then just gains a dumb amount of life. Moving to combat, he swings the Tokens, Resplendent, and Valkyrie at Kuzno, while Giada goes at Bryce. Before moving to blocks, I cast Sudden Spoiling and target Eric to help make blocking easier. Kuzno blocks what he can, and surprisingly comes away from combat having gained life, while Eric has much less of a board. I draw and play a swamp. I uptick Liliana to find even more swamps to hand, and follow up with a Massacre Worm. This has Kuzno sacrificing 2 clues to Lonis, and activates his ability looking at Bryce's top 2. He keeps the Prismatic Lens, and then loses some life as his 2 toughness or less creatures die to the enter the battlefield trigger from the Massacre Worm. I pass after that. Kuzno plays a Forest, and then recasts Lonis. He goes to combat, hitting Bryce to gain some life. As Kuzno announces he'll pass turn, Bryce sacrifices the sequestered stash, milling 4, and puts the Forsaken Monument back on top of his library. Bryce draws and plays a Wastes. And then recasts the monument. He passes to Eric after that. Eric taps 5 in his main phase for a Karmic Guide, which has him scrying as he casts it. He gets to put some counters on it from Giada, and gains some life from the Bishop. With it entering, he also gets to return the Resplendent Angel. This has him gaining even more life, and adding 4 +1/+1 counters to it. Moving to combat, he swings Giada at Liliana and the Angel of Jubilation at Kuzno. Before the angels connect, Kuzno casts Jace's Scrutiny to reduce the damage, and gets to investigate. Eric then passes after that's done, and gains another token at his end step, and gets to put 5 +1/+1 counters onto it, gaining even more life. I draw and finally find a board wipe, casting Decree of Pain. Lots of creatures die, and their owners lose some life. I then get to draw a bunch of cards, while Eric makes some spirit tokens as the angels died. I then activate Liliana, finding a swamp, and passing, discarding down to 7. Kuzno draws and cracks a few clue tokens before playing out a Floodhound, and then puts some Lightning Greaves to the field. He then casts a Trail of Evidence, passing after that. Bryce untaps and has a healthy amount of mana finally. He plays a tapped Ruins of Oran Reef, and then casts a Voidwind Ore, gaining some life as he casts a colorless spell. He passes after that. Eric has an Archangel of Thune for turn, gaining some life as she enters, which lets him put a +1/+1 counter onto each of his creatures. He swings one of the spirits at Liliana and one at Kuzno to kill him, and the rest goes to Bryce. With nothing else, he passes after that. I play a swamp for turn and cast Soul Ring. I then bring out the bigger Liliana Vess and down-tick her to basically sorcery speed Vampiric Tutor. I pass once I'm done searching. Bryce plays an Encroaching Waste as his land for turn, and taps 5 lands to make 10 mana needed to cast Ulamog. He gains 2 life from the Monument, and gets to exile the Archangel and Pathland Eric's side. He then taps some more mana for a Blight Herder, putting the 2 recently exiled cards on Eric's side into Eric's graveyard to make 3 1/1 Eldrazi Scion tokens. He also gains 2 life from the Monument. Moving to combat, the Void Winnower takes out Liliana, and Bryce passes. Eric draws and swings the spirits at Bryce. They connect, and Eric passes after that. I draw, and the Void Winnower is just basically shutting down my hand, and all I can do is pass. Bryce sacrifices the Encroaching Waste to its ability to nuke Eric's Seraph Sanctum. He then pays 2 for a Mind Stone, gaining some life from casting a colorless spell. More mana is then tapped for a Meteor Golem, gaining him even more life, and he targets one of Eric's spirits as it enters. Eric responds by casting Flawless Maneuvers to save the spirit. Bryce then sacrifices the Mind Stone to draw a card and goes to combat. He swings his team at Eric, exiling his top 20 cards from the Ulamog on attack trigger, and then dealing 40 damage as the Eldrazi's connect. He passes after that. Eric untaps and draws. He swings all but 1 token at Bryce, connecting, and then passing after that. I have a swamp for turn, and count up my mana. I pass, telling the table, my hand is entirely even, and my commander's even, and the one spell I can cast is not going to help anyone. Bryce plays a Wastes and casts a Kozilek Chandler, gaining 2 life, and then activates Rogue's Passage once it's out, and targets Ulamog. This lets him swing at Eric unhindered, and the rest go at me. Eric exiles his top 20 cards, but regardless gets taken out with commander damage, while I take 33 points of damage. Bryce passes after that. I untap, and draw, and show my hand to Kuzno. I've got a hot mess of nothing. My only option for the time being is to cast an Exsanguinate with an odd number in the X, but it's not enough to save me from the next crackback, and I know I'm dead, and scoop it up to Bryce. Game review time. It felt like this game most of the time I had to keep mana up in my Vilis deck, because Lonis doesn't really have a lot of removal outside of Cyclonic Rift, and Bryce was so far behind in terms of mana with that Ulamog deck, I didn't expect All Is Dust anytime soon. Speaking of Eric, Giada has done wonders for angel-based decks. She's ramp and makes them bigger, which is just fantastic. Plus we've had a lot of support cards coming in from sets like that Valkyrie. I still think Lonis is one of the most interesting Simic commanders. Yes, it makes tokens, but clue tokens are kinda cool, and I found that Kuzno really leaned into that theme. I think his main win con was Food Chain, but I've been blown out by Lonis with things like Rise and Shine, animating all of their clue tokens and killing me with them before, so hopefully that would be a plan B for him. I really didn't expect much from Bryce this game after he lost that Forsaken Monument. Colorless Eldrazi are very expensive, and not having his mana doubler basically meant that he was only playing 1 land a turn and trying to keep up with a green deck and a white deck that had already built ramp. He got there though in the end, and I think the MVP for him probably was that Sequestered Stash, allowing him to put the Monument back on top of his library. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.